For 18 years, Viktor Petrov had been the perfect Boston cabbie. Polite, efficient, forgettable. He'd driven thousands of passengers, heard countless conversations, and never once revealed that he understood languages besides English. But when 3 Russian operatives got into his taxi and started planning to eliminate a defector, Viktor spoke 3 words that changed everything. Ne delay eto. Don't do it. Welcome to People's Journal Stories. Before we begin this incredible story of hidden identities and deadly secrets, tell us in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Because sometimes the most dangerous passengers aren't the ones who threaten you. They're the ones who don't know you understand every word they're saying. Viktor Petrov's taxi license said he was born in Sofia, Bulgaria in 1961. Immigrated to America in 2006. The documentation was perfect, the story unbreakable. What it didn't mention was that Viktor had once been Colonel Vladimir Kozlov, GRU intelligence officer who'd vanished during the Soviet collapse. For 18 years, he had driven Boston streets in a yellow Crown Victoria that had seen better decades. Viktor knew every shortcut from Logan Airport to Beacon Hill, could navigate Big Dig traffic with his eyes closed, and maintained a perfect 4.8 star rating on ride-sharing apps, despite his refusal to make small talk. His English was good but accented, his manner polite but distant. Most passengers assumed he was just another Eastern European immigrant grinding out a living in America's gig economy. They had no reason to suspect that their quiet driver was fluent in 7 languages, and had once coordinated intelligence operations across 3 continents. Viktor's routine was deliberately mundane. Same 12-hour shifts, same coffee shop for breaks, same modest apartment in Somerville where he lived alone with 2 cats and a collection of chess books. He attended Mass at St. Anthony's every Sunday, not out of faith, but because it provided perfect cover for a man trying to blend into the immigrant community. The transformation from Colonel Kozlov to Viktor Petrov hadn't been voluntary. When the USSR collapsed in 1991, Viktor had been running deep cover operations in Western Europe. As governments fell and allegiances shifted, he'd found himself stranded, too valuable to abandon, too dangerous to bring home to a Russia he no longer recognized. So he'd done what intelligence operatives do. He'd disappeared. New identity, new country, new life. The skills that had once made him one of the GRU's most effective officers now helped him navigate Boston traffic and deal with drunk college students at 2 a.m. That Tuesday night started like any other. Viktor was parked outside the Four Seasons, waiting for the hotel doorman to wave him forward when 3 men in expensive suits approached his taxi. They moved with the fluid precision Viktor recognized from his former life, either military or intelligence, definitely Russian. "Airport," the first man said in accented English as they climbed into the back seat. Viktor nodded and pulled into traffic. In his rearview mirror, he could see the men settling in for what appeared to be a business conversation. They spoke quietly at first, in English, discussing flight times and hotel reservations. But as they left downtown Boston and headed toward the Mass Pike, their conversation shifted to Russian. Viktor's hands tightened imperceptibly on the steering wheel. For 18 years, no one had spoken Russian in his presence. He'd been careful to avoid the local Russian community, to never reveal that he understood the language of his former life. Now, 3 men who clearly didn't know his background were about to have a conversation they assumed was private. "The target will be at the conference tomorrow," the man directly behind Viktor said in Russian. "Second floor, room 247, presentation at 3 p.m. Viktor's blood chilled. He kept his eyes on the road, his expression neutral, but his mind was racing. These weren't businessmen heading to catch a flight. They were operatives discussing an operation. The conversation in the back seat continued in rapid Russian. Viktor caught enough to understand they were planning an assassination, a Russian defector who'd been writing articles exposing old GRU operations. "Dmitry Volkov," one of them said, "finally tracked him down, living in Cambridge under the name David Walker, teaching Russian literature at Harvard." Viktor's hands trembled slightly. Dmitry Volkov. He remembered him, a young signals intelligence officer who disappeared in 1993, 2 years after Victor's own defection. Apparently, Dmitri had also made it to America and built a new life. Method? Asked the third man. Poison, Novichok derivative, untraceable. He'll collapse during his lecture, appear to be a heart attack. We'll be airborne before anyone realizes what happened. Victor forced himself to maintain normal driving speed, but his mind was spinning. These men were discussing murdering a fellow defector, someone who'd escaped the same collapsing system Victor had fled. Someone who was probably just trying to live quietly, like Victor himself. Timeline? Injection during the coffee break. He always gets espresso from the cart outside the lecture hall. Our contact has access to the service area. Victor realized they were talking about tomorrow. Less than 24 hours. A man who'd spent 30 years building a new identity was about to die because he'd been too public about his past. The GPS showed 15 minutes to Logan Airport. In 15 minutes, these killers would disappear onto a flight, and Dmitri Volkov would have less than a day to live. Victor had spent 18 years avoiding exactly this situation, being forced to choose between his safety and his conscience. He'd built his invisible life specifically to never have to make this choice again. But as he listened to the men casually discuss murder, Victor realized that some choices find you no matter how carefully you hide. Documents are prepared, the lead operative continued in Russian. Academic conference on Russian literature, perfect cover. We attend as cultural attachés, eliminate the target, and fly out before the body is discovered. Victor merged onto the airport access road. 5 minutes to the terminal. 5 minutes to decide whether to remain Viktor Petrov, invisible cab driver, or become something more dangerous. The Target's latest article mentioned Operation Nightfall, one of them said, details that were supposed to stay buried. Operation Nightfall. Victor's blood froze. He'd been the coordinator for Nightfall in 1989, a joint operation between GRU and Stasi to eliminate Western intelligence assets in East Berlin. The operation had been classified beyond top secret, known only to a handful of officers. If Dmitri was writing about Nightfall, he wasn't just exposing general GRU operations. He was exposing specific missions that Victor had run, which meant that if these assassins succeeded, Victor's own cover might be next. Any other targets after Volkov? Victor asked in perfect, unaccented Russian. The car went completely silent. In the rearview mirror, Victor watched 3 faces register shock, then immediate calculation. They were professional killers who just realized their driver wasn't who he appeared to be. Pull over, the lead man said quietly, his hand moving inside his jacket. Victor smiled grimly and accelerated toward the airport. I don't think so. Who are you? The man demanded. Someone who ran Operation Nightfall, someone who knows exactly what Dmitri Volkov is writing about, and someone who's about to make sure you never reach that plane. The man in the back seat was fully reaching for his weapon now, but Victor had 18 years of driving Boston's aggressive traffic. He knew every inch of the airport approach, every concrete barrier and construction zone. Victor jerked the wheel hard right, sending the taxi into the emergency lane and toward a concrete barrier. He'd calculated the angle perfectly, hard enough to disable the car and shake up his passengers, but not hard enough to kill anyone. The impact threw all 3 men forward. Victor, who'd braced for it, was out of the driver's seat before they could recover. By the time the first assassin fumbled for his gun, Victor was already on his phone. This is Falcon, he said in English, using a code name he hadn't spoken in decades. I need immediate assistance at Logan Airport Terminal C approach. 3 Russian operatives, planned assassination in progress. The voice that answered was crisp, professional, and had been waiting 18 years for this call. 20 minutes later, Victor sat in the back of an unmarked van while FBI agents processed the 3 Russians. His taxi was being towed away as evidence, and his 18 years of invisibility were officially over. Colonel Vladimir Kozlov, said Agent Rebecca Shaw, reviewing a file that was thicker than a phone book. Presumed dead since 1991, the GRU held a memorial service. I was invited, Victor replied dryly. Had to decline due to scheduling conflicts. Agent Shaw wasn't amused. You've been running a taxi company in Boston for 18 years. living under a false identity, no contact with intelligence services, completely off our radar. That was the point. Why reveal yourself now? You could have let them complete their mission and stayed invisible. Victor looked out the van's window at Logan Airport, where passengers hurried past with their ordinary problems and normal lives. Because Dmitry Volkov deserves the same chance at invisibility that I had, and because those men weren't just planning one murder. What do you mean? Victor pulled out his phone and showed Agent Shaw a text message he'd received 10 minutes ago. Package delivered to backup targets. Operation Nightfall cleanup proceeds as scheduled. There are others, Victor explained, other defectors from Nightfall. They're not just killing Dmitry, they're eliminating everyone who knows about the operation. Agent Shaw's expression darkened. How many others? 5 that I know of, maybe more. All living under assumed identities, all trying to stay invisible like I was. Can you find them? Victor was quiet for a moment. Finding them would mean using skills he'd tried to forget, reaching out to networks he'd spent 18 years avoiding, and becoming Vladimir Kozlov again, instead of remaining Viktor Petrov. Yes, he said finally, but it means I can never go back to driving a taxi. Agent Shaw closed the file. Colonel Kozlov, your taxi driving days are over anyway. The question is whether you want to help us save the others. Victor spent the next 6 hours working with a joint FBI-CIA task force to identify and locate the remaining Nightfall survivors. His memory of the operation was perfect, and his knowledge of how deep cover operatives thought allowed him to predict where they might have gone to ground. Dr. Elena Petrov, former signals intelligence officer, now teaching mathematics at UC Berkeley under the name Ellen Peterson. Marcus Weber, former East Berlin liaison, running a small accounting firm in Portland under the name Mike Webb. Yuri Semenov, former field operative, working as a museum security guard in Washington, D.C. under the name George Simon. Each had built careful, invisible lives. Each was about to die unless Victor could reach them first. The operation took 18 hours. Victor flew to California while FBI teams moved on Portland and Washington. He found Elena grading papers in her Berkeley office, completely unaware that 2 men had been asking questions about her at the campus coffee shop that morning. Nightingale, Victor said quietly when she answered her office door. Elena's face went white. Nightingale had been her operational code name 35 years ago. Vladimir, she whispered, they found us, Elena. All of us. We need to go now. By midnight, all 3 surviving Nightfall operatives were in federal protective custody. The assassination teams were either captured or had fled the country. The immediate threat was over, but Victor's invisible life as a Boston cab driver was finished forever. 6 months later, Victor worked as a consultant for the FBI's counterintelligence division, helping identify and protect other Cold War-era defectors living under assumed identities in the United States. He missed driving taxi more than he expected. There had been something peaceful about navigating Boston streets, solving the simple problems of getting people from point A to point B. But sometimes, late at night when he was reviewing classified files, Victor would remember the moment in his taxi when he chose to speak 3 words in Russian. Ne delai eto. Don't do it. He'd spent 18 years learning to be invisible. In the end, it took just 3 words to remember how to be seen. Victor's story reminds us that some people carry the weight of history in silence, and that heroism sometimes means giving up the peaceful life you've built to protect others. This fictional tale honors those who've lived double lives and made sacrifices we'll never fully understand. Tell us in the comments, what city are you watching from? Have you ever wondered about the hidden stories of the people who serve you every day? Subscribe to People's Journal Stories for more narratives about invisible heroes and the moments when ordinary people make extraordinary choices.